Saw 6. It's a 2009 horror film which is now being directed by Kevin Greutert. And the plot is we see Detective Hoffman, who at the end of the last film, he somehow was successful in not only killing Agent Strom, who was the only person that figured out who he was, but he's been able to implicate this guy as being the Jigsaw killer, or at least the apprentice. So now you see him, he thinks he got away from it, and he has to pretend like he's helping these FBI agents in order to find where Strom is, until we see that there's these two other agents that are not so sure that Strom was the killer. Now, what I think of Saw 6 is, I love this movie. I do. I feel like by this point, maybe even a couple movies beforehand, but by this point especially, a lot of people looked at Saw and still think of Saw as nothing but torture porn, and all it is to sit there and watch people get brutally murdered and torn apart. I'm not saying that any of those statements are untrue, but I will say that I do think there are a lot more to these Saw movies, especially this one. I love the fact that we can get so far into this franchise, so far into these sequels, and Saw 6 can prove those critics wrong, can have a story that does say something, that is inspired. I love the fact that, let's get away from the main plot, but what I feel like should be and is kind of more the main plot. We meet this character, Will, who is the head of this insurance company. And he has this policy where he has to figure out which patients will be more likely to survive their treatment. And that's how he determines whether they're going to care for them or not. So basically, he gets to choose who lives and who dies. And I love the fact that that's the plot, because not only does it make it personal for somebody like Jigsaw, who we get a great flashback scene of him interacting with this guy and Jigsaw being turned down for healthcare. Look how much of an issue healthcare is today, and how many people just hate the fact that they have to pay so much money for the health insurance, but yet when they need the care, when they need the help, they don't get it. And that's been a problem for so long, that to see a horror movie, no less, do something with that idea, wow. And I also like seeing this character have to go through his own trials and tests, how he has to go up to all of his own workers, with them being put in situations, and he has to choose who lives and who dies. It's not so good from that point of view now, is it? Now let's talk more about Detective Hoffman, because like I said, he thought he got away with it at first, but when Agent Erickson and Agent Perez, who we thought was killed after what happened to her in Saw 4, she's back. I think this is the movie where I liked Hoffman the most, because sure, he's still dangerous, he's still a terrible character. I like how in this movie he's most desperate, he's most vulnerable. His back is up against the wall because these two agents are gathering all the evidence, they're putting the pieces together, they're starting to realize that Strom just doesn't make sense being the killer, and they're starting to realize that his, quote, fingerprints aren't really all that they should be. So I love seeing Hoffman up against the wall and just not knowing what to do when it comes to these two. But some of my favorite things, like I said, the Jigsaw flashback. We get a lot of flashbacks of Amanda. Yes, Shawnee Smith is indeed back, at least through flashback form. And I didn't realize how much I missed Amanda in the Saw movies until I saw her back here. She really brings just a certain type of energy to this character in the scenes that she's in. Seeing her interact with Jill, which we're seeing that for the first time, and also seeing her with Hoffman, because they do not like each other. They're almost competing for who's going to be the real apprentice, the better apprentice. They're fighting over Jigsaw's admiration And I really enjoyed that. I like the scenes where she's poking fun at Hoffman and basically saying how much better she is. And the big, or at least one of the big reveals, is finding out that she had a lot to do with why Jigsaw and Jill lost their baby. Seeing how much involvement Amanda had in that and just how guilty she felt about that, I really enjoyed that about her character. And also, I guess, seeing that Hoffman was the reason why she ended up killing Lynn in Saw 3. Sure, it changes her character motivations, Amanda's character motivations from that film, but it was interesting enough that I welcome that. Now let's talk about the traps, because the traps were very inspired in this film. Some of the best traps. Like, at the very beginning, we see these two workers, this guy and this woman, and they basically have to cut off as much body parts as possible before this head trap squeezes their temple and kills them. And the woman who cuts her hand off, her whole arm off, her acting, just how intense she was and how much she was determined to cut her fucking arm off, I love that. Or the character Will, their insurance guy, and the janitor, how they're hung up in this device that the more they breathe, the closer these two things come to crush their sides and their chest. And that was very different because there wasn't a score during that. It was more on them trying to hold their breath and not wanting this machine to crush them. But also, speaking of hard to watch, the merry-go-round trap, which is what it's called, because you see the 6 workers who work for the insurance, and they're basically the ones who catch any errors or anything wrong with these clients. Seeing them all basically beg and plead for their lives was in some ways comical, but in other ways disturbing, because then you start to see one by one they get shot with the shotgun and they're dying off, and Will has to choose which one he's willing to crush his hand for to save. He can only pick 2 of them. That trap especially is some of the most memorable moments through any of the Saw movies. But let's talk about the twist, because I feel like they completely redeemed themselves from Saw 5's lame ending, where not only did I talk about Amanda and her feeling guilty and Hoffman getting her killed, but the fact that in the insurance guy's story, that ultimately this wasn't his test. This was more that once he made it to the end, it was up to the wife and son of the guy who he denied coverage. They got to choose whether or not they were willing to let him survive. I definitely didn't see that coming. I thought it was shocking, and that's a good way to do a twist with characters that we're just meeting in this movie. But with the main story, you see that Hoffman is being tested by Jigsaw. For the first time, Jigsaw had arranged for his wife Jill to get the bear trap. Very cool to see that back. So Jill puts the bear trap on Hoffman's face, and he has to show if he's strong enough to survive. And the way the movie ends with him somehow getting out of the trap and ripping half of his face off in order to do it and surviving, just the shot of him screaming with blood coming out in the hole in his face, I'm like, wow, that's a fucking ending to a Saw film. So guys, clearly I really, really enjoy this film. I think it's so much better than Saw 4 and 5. They came back with a bang. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen Saw 6. What do you think of it? Like and subscribe. Later!